welcome to episode 19 of Lucretius Today. I'm your host Cassius, and together with my panelists from the EpicureanFriends.com forum, we'll walk you through the 6 books of Lucretius's poem and discuss how Epicurean philosophy can apply to you today. Be aware that none of us are professional philosophers, and everyone here is a self-taught Epicurean. We encourage you to study Epicurus for yourself, and we suggest the best place to start is the book Epicurus and His Philosophy by Canadian professor Norman DeWitt. Before we start with today's episode, let me remind you of our 3 ground rules. First, our aim is to go back to the original text to bring you an accurate presentation of classical Epicurean philosophy as the ancient Epicureans understood it, not simply repeat for you what passes for conventional wisdom about Epicurus today. Second, we won't be talking about Epicurus from the point of view of modern political perspectives. Epicurus must be understood on his own, and not in terms of competitive schools which may seem similar to Epicurus but are fundamentally different and incompatible, such as Stoicism, Humanism, Buddhism, Taoism, Atheism, and Marxism. Third, we'll be approaching Epicurus exactly as he intended, with the goal of understanding the fundamental nature of the universe as the essential base of Epicurean philosophy. From this perspective, you'll see that Epicurus taught neither the pursuit of luxury nor the pursuit of simple living, but the pursuit of pleasure, using feeling as the guide to life, and not supernatural gods, idealism, or virtue ethics. As important as anything else, Epicurus taught that there is no life after death, and that any happiness we will ever have must come in this life, which is why it is so important not to waste time in confusion. Remember that our podcast homepage is lucretiustoday.com, where you can download a free copy of the versions of the poem we're reading, and our home for discussion of Lucretius and all other aspects of Epicurean philosophy is EpicureanFriends.com. Now for today in this episode 19, we'll discuss how all things are not formed from tiny pieces of the same thing, or either from tiny pieces of everything, which was the theory called homeomery put forth by Anaxagoras. Now let's join our discussion with Elaine and Charles reading today's text from Book 1.
Now let us inquire into the homeomery of Anaxagoras. The Greeks so call it, but the poverty of the Latin tongue will not allow us to express it. But yet, by a short periphrasis, we can imagine that thing which he calls homeomery and makes the principles of bodies. For instance, bones proceed from small and little bones, and flesh is made of small and little bits of flesh, and blood is formed of many drops of blood flowing together, and gold, he thinks, consists of little grains of gold, and earth grows firm by particles of earth, fire is made of fire, water from water springs, and all things else, he thinks, from causes such as these arise. And yet this man in no case will allow in things a void, nor that there is an end to bodies being divided. He equally mistakes in both, and so do those sages spoken of before. Besides, the seeds he chose are much too weak if, of the same frail nature they consist, as do the things themselves, they equally fall to decay and perish. Nothing hinders them from death, for which of these can long hold out against the fierce jaws of death, and so escape destruction, crushed between his very teeth? Can fire? Can air? Can water? Which of these? Can blood? Can bone? In my opinion, none. All things in nature, then, would be equally liable to death, as are such things we see before our eyes by any force destroyed. But this, I think, is fully proved before, that nothing can fall to nothing, or from nothing rise. Besides, since food increases and supports the body, then we know the veins, the blood, the bones consist of heterogeneous and parts dissimilar, as does our food. But if they say all food consists of parts various and mixed, and in itself contains the little strings of nerves and bones, and all the veins and parts of blood, then all dry meat and drink must needs consist of parts dissimilar, of bones, of nerves, of veins, and mingled blood. Further, if all things which grow from the earth are in the earth contained, the earth must consist of parts dissimilar, as do those things from which the earth arise. Now change the theme, but keep the terms the same. In wood, if flame and smoke and ashes lay concealed, then wood must needs consist of parts of different frame. But here a thin evasion seems to shake this argument a little, and Anaxagoras himself makes use of it. He thinks all things are mixed with all things and lie hid, but that one thing only appears of which it most abounds, and on the surface lies. But this reply is vain and wide from truth, for then the little grains of corn, when ground, would show some signs of blood, or of some other parts which form our bodies. And when we wear the stones, the blood would flow. But by the like reason, herbs would sweat sweet drops of liquor, so delightful to the taste as flow from dugs of woolly sheep, and clods of crumbled earth would show the various kinds of fruits and herbs, and leaves distinct and hid in smallest particles within the earth. And then in wood divided might be seen concealed ashes and smoke, and smallest parts of fire. But since experience shows nothing of this appears, we must conclude there's no such mixture as this in things, but say that common seeds of many things in various order joined are mixed in everything, and lie concealed.
Charles?
But oft you say upon the mountain tops, the heads of lofty trees that grow together are by the violent blasts of forcing winds so rubbed by close collision that they soon are all on fire, and flames shine out. 'Tis true, and yet there's no actual fire within the wood, but many seeds of fire, which by hard rubbing ignite, and so the wood is all in flames. For if so much of fire had lain concealed within the wood, this fire would have appeared immediately, and so consumed the wood entirely, and burnt its root branches to the ground. You see, therefore, of what concern it is, as we observed before, with what first principles those seeds are joined, and in what order placed, and what the motions are they give and take among themselves, and how the seeds remaining ever the same, but yet their order changed, produce a fire from wood. Just as we write ignis and lignum, though quite different words, they are yet composed of letters much the same. Lastly, if things most obvious to the senses, you think, cannot be formed unless you make their seeds consist of principles the same in nature, those principles would be destroyed. You would see some seeds would shake their little sides with laughing, and some bedew their face with tears. Now what remains, observe, attend me close. I know my theme is dark, but the great love of praise pricks on my heart with sharpest spurs, and strikes my soul at once with sweet desire of the most tuneful line. But this urged on, my mind in rapture, I haunt the muses' seats of difficult access and yet untrod. I love to approach the purest springs, and thence to draw large draughts. I love to crop fresh flowers, a noble garland for my head, from thence where yet the muses never bound another's temple with a crown like mine. And first I write of lofty things, and strive to free the mind from the severest of bonds of what men call religion. Then my verse I frame so clear, although my theme be dark, seasoning my lines with the poetic sweets of fancy, and reason justifies the method. For as the physicians, when they would prevail on children to take down a bitter draught of wormwood, first tinge the edges of the cup, so that the children's unsuspecting age may be deceived, at least their lips, and take the bitter juice, thus harmlessly betrayed, but not abused, they have their health restored. So I, because this system seems severe and harsh to such who have not yet discerned its truth, and the common herd are utterly averse to this philosophy, I thought it fit to show their rigid principles in verse smooth and alluring, and tinge them, as it were, with sweet poetic honey, thus to charm thy mind with my soft numbers, till you view the nature of all things clearly, and perceive the figure and order they display.
Thanks, Charles. That last paragraph has a lot in it that we're going to want to discuss in detail, but so does the rest of the detail about Anaxagoras before that. So why don't we go back to the beginning of what was read and start with that, but make sure we save enough time to discuss that last paragraph and all the poetic and general observations he's making there. So going back to the beginning, homeomery.
Yeah, great word. I'm going to try to throw that into casual conversation sometime this week.
So it seems like there are two divisions here. There's the homeomery where everything is composed. First of all, the theory seems to have been that bones are composed of little bones, and flesh is made of small pieces of flesh, and blood is made of small drops of blood, and things like that. I guess that made some sense.
Although he also says, we can't take that alone, because if he goes further down, saying that things are mixed with other things, but if there's a preponderance of one thing, that's what it's going to look like. That's a fascinating idea, right? So maybe bones had bones and flesh and fire in it, but there was more of bone particles, so it's going to look like a bone instead. I think it's really interesting. Before we had instruments that could measure things, I didn't even know that this was one of the early ideas about how matter was composed. But it's not a stupid idea. It's wrong, but it's interesting. Our history as thinkers about the composition of matter.
When you say it's not a stupid idea, that's what I was going to say next. He doesn't call Anaxagoras a doting old fool like he called Heraclitus. He disagrees. And he actually does kind of get sarcastic. I did not remember that this section was in this part, but in what's labeled here as line 914, that's when he kind of uses the sarcasm that if things really were divisible, then you'd have seeds that would be basically alive, and they would shake their little sides with laughter and bedew their face with tears, laughing at the concept of how ridiculous this idea was.
I thought that was so funny that I was glad I had muted myself when Charles was reading, because I started laughing. I would have interrupted you, Charles. That was funny.
Well, before we get back down into that detail, let's go back still at the beginning. Okay, he lays out what the theory is. Gold is made of little particles of gold and so forth. But then he also reminds us, lest we ever get too far from this concept, that Anaxagoras did not allow that there is a void in things, or that there's an end to division. So, boy, Lucretius is constantly pointing us back to those two issues as being of very prime importance. That there must be a void in things, and that there is an end to division.
We can add an Anaxagoras to Lucretius's onslaught here.
Yes.
But if it says that gold consists of little grains of gold, which is actually quite accurate at some level, that means there has to be some sort of limit implied in Anaxagoras' homeomery.
But if they're infinitely divisible, that's not right. So, I mean, yes, there are gold is an element, so there are atoms of gold in a bar of gold, but the atoms themselves aren't made of gold. They're fundamental particles smaller than the atom.
But if you look at moderate magnification, we actually can make visible that gold is made of grains of gold. So these are again pieces of gold, which then one grain contains many atoms of gold. No? And so it's not something which could not be further divided, but many metals are normally structured like that, so that there is some intermediate scale where they form grains.
Yeah, okay, I can get that, but I don't think that's what he means, Martin. Do you? I think Anaxagoras thought the gold was infinitely divisible into just more gold, smaller and smaller forever.
But then it doesn't make sense to talk about grains of gold.
Yeah, that's an
inconsistent. The same also goes to bones, because bones, small and little bones. I'm sure it's, with grains of gold and little bones, it's sort of, you have these little bits of matter, but they're already small bits of their whole selves. I'm sure there's no limit to that, and that's what exactly Lucretius is talking about in lines 843.
Right. I mean, this wouldn't make sense if he was just talking about the intermediate scale. That's pretty obvious, but he's talking about Anaxagoras saying that you just keep on going. You can divide your blood up into drops and tinier drops and tinier drops and just keep on going forever.
But with the bones, it doesn't make sense, because if you crack open a bone, you see that it's not homogeneous. You can you can easily distinguish at least two very different, probably three different parts. And you can see open space between them. So that means either Anaxagoras was not empiric at all. He just looked at a whole bone and then was thinking up the rest. Or how to say this? It's more like, with respect to the bones, it does not make sense at all.
Unless he was talking about by bone, he didn't know that there was a difference between the cortex of the bone but he might not have been talking about the marrow, which would be easier to see. He might just thought, the hard part that you can see. He might not have known it was two different kinds of arrangements of the structure.
If we go on to the next paragraph, it's interesting the way you guys have made a lot of interesting points. Lucretius seems in the next paragraph to attack it from a slightly different direction, or just by making the point first that he goes back to the issue of infinite divisibility, I guess. He's saying that if you could go back and continue dividing fire small enough, you'd have that same problem of eventually everything would be destroyed and everything would disappear.
Right.
All nature would be equally liable to death, and you would not see anything that would be able to resist the forces of destruction. So that's his first observation. So just in terms of looking at Lucretius's method of analysis, he explains what the theory is. He makes the point that the theory does not account for void and it does not account for infinite indivisibility. Then he makes the point that, based on infinite divisibility, I guess, that under Anaxagoras' theory, you'd have the same problem of eventually everything would be destroyed to nothing and reality would disappear. And then what's the next one?
The food paragraph is a bit confusing, I have to admit.
Yes, he's saying that the food we eat.
Right, that to make our bodies, if our bodies are made out of food because the food increases the body, then that must mean that the food has in it itself little bits of sinews and bones and veins and portions of gore.
Yes.
Portions of gore. It sounds like a name of a band. So everything would have to have in it our bodies, basically, already part of it.
And then the earth, if everything that comes from the earth consists of parts of earth, then
the earth has to have all that in it, just where you can't see it. It's hidden. It says in logs, flame lurks hidden in smoke and ash.
Then he uses that phrasing, now change the theme, but keep the terms the same.
Monroe translates that as apply again this reasoning to other things, and you may use just the same words. So he's just saying, that happens with the earth, and, that would still be the same with flame and smoke and wood, and, you can just keep going that's the principle.
The Bailey translation is pretty good. Shift this to another field. You may use the same words again.
Yeah.
Okay, so then after that is when he introduces the possibility that Anaxagoras also said that all things are in all things. Up to that point, been sort of more vertical. He's been saying blood's made of blood, gold's made of gold. Now he's saying that Anaxagoras allowed himself the out in his argument by saying that, well, all things are in all things. It's not that only gold is in gold, but within gold is little pieces of everything.
Yeah, and the only thing you see is that which is the most. The majority wins. And I love this is where he starts getting funny, where he's about the low grains of corn. You would have blood because you grind it up. You're going to see the parts that it's made out of.
You'd be able to get gold from those little grains of corn if you divided it up that way.
Yeah, right.
The sheep milk would be sweet.
But since experience shows nothing of this appears, we must conclude there's no such mixture as in these things. But say that the common seeds of many things in various order joined are mixed in everything and lie concealed. So in that sense, when he gets down to the atomic level, does he end up kind of agreeing?
Well, he's saying it's not a matter of the majority wins. It's a matter of how you arrange the letters, which letters and, how you're.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He makes a direct comparison at the end of 906.
Yes, with the letters and words again. What about, before we skip down there, what about this issue of the trees on the tops of mountains rubbing together and bursting out in flame?
I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
Think about lightning as if this is happening during a storm, but
I thought I had
never light a tree on fire.
I thought I had heard of forest fires starting that way. Martin, have you heard of that?
Yes, I heard this also, that this is a way how fire may happen naturally, especially in the Mediterranean, which at that time of Lucretius was already turned into quite dry forest in many areas. So the original forest was gone, and then the shrubs which grew after, they can really burn easily based on this mechanism in the summer.
Google about this, but what would
I
you?
took a class on forestry, but I did not retain much.
Elaine,
So
what did you say?
with no lightning at all, it can just start a fire?
I know an underbrush of a forest can get very densely packed with dead.
Right.
I don't know where I read it, but I remember what Martin has remembered, that maybe it's when the wind is strong enough and the wood is dry enough and the pieces are big enough, maybe it can, maybe
But
the
leaves are
impact.
not dry, I mean, unless they're dying. But all right, so let's see, crown fire.
It's a wood directly rubbing on wood. The leaves are not involved.
Right.
The leaves may be involved. If they're around, they will catch fire more easily than because the wood will not give a strong flame first. No? It will just smolder a bit, and when it reaches the leaves, they may then burn more rapidly and then promote the fire.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here is just like the starting on the undergrowth or by lightning, and it can spread through the crowns. It can be a crown fire that spread through the tops of the trees, but it didn't start from the leaves rubbing against each other the way he's describing here.
Does he mention the leaves rather than the wood?
Yeah, but anyway, I'm not seeing anything about the wood at the tops of the trees being where these spontaneous fires start. It's by the underbrush, the dead matter, and getting enough heat to spontaneously combust. That would not by friction.
Actually, I just reread it, and I don't think he's implying that it's the wood, or by extension, yes, the wood.
Yeah, it would be the wood read by close collision. I'm not seeing that anywhere.
So he's saying 'tis true, and yet there's no actual fire within the wood, but
right.
But many seeds of fire, which by hard rubbing ignite. So I think he's talking more about friction leading to a preponderance of fire within this theory of Anaxagoras, and that can come about by the trees being too close together.
But I don't think that happens. I don't know if somebody can find a reference for that. But no, you can rub your sticks together and do that, but I don't think there's anything about a wind doing that. Anyway.
Oh, it can.
That's interesting.
I went to a page with some guy from forestry. He says it's rare, but it may happen.
Can you send us the link?
I saw a link to that effect on Quora a minute ago, but I know I've read that somewhere else. I'm going to, as people say on these podcasts, I'll put a link in the show notes if I can find an example.
Okay.
I have this picture that I've in my mind that I've seen somewhere of pictures of just trees waving back and forth in the wind and coming against each other and thereby generating enough friction. But it's interesting. See if we can find an example of that.
Yeah, like do it, actually seeing it happen so that you knew it didn't come from the brush.
Right.
Yeah, I think you'd want video.
All right, well, shall we move to the 914, the little seeds shaking their sides with laughter and to the point of tears, it sounds like, because they're amused at the thought. I know what I'm comparing this to in my mind. There's another section where they talk about souls lining up to inhabit bodies later on. That's also sort of a sarcastic reference. This one is different, though. This one is little seeds laughing at becoming big seeds or laughing at the idea.
Bureaucratic afterlife.
I love it. I mean, it's just so funny that matter itself is laughing at you.
That's a fairly well-known section. Let's see what Monroe says. If you suppose that whatever you perceive among visible things cannot be produced without imagining bodies of matter possessed of a like nature, in this way you'll find the first beginnings of things are destroyed. It will come to this, that they will be shaken by loud fits of convulsive laughter, and will bedew with salt tears face and cheeks. Bailey says, nay, it will come to be that they will be shaken with quivering mirth and laugh aloud, and wet face and cheeks with salt tears. Okay, well, now let's go on to the final paragraph, which Bailey starts out by saying, come now, learn what remains, and listen to clearer words. And he goes back and repeats, I don't know how many times in the book this appears, but he goes back and repeats the discussion of, later on, the wormwood reference. But before he gets to wormwood, he talks about approaching the springs of the Paradies and approaching them and drinking his fill. This is more poetry again. This is where Elaine needs to weigh in on the.
Well, let's see. We should look at Stallings then, because she has a knack for that. So let's see. She says, now pay attention to what follows and prick up your ears, nor does it escape me how obscure all this appears. But the goad of hoped for glory strikes my spirit to inspire, and at the selfsame moment smites my heart with sweet desire for muses stirring up my thoughts, my mind abuzz. I blaze new trails across their mountain haunts among untrodden ways. I thrill to come upon untasted springs and slake my thirst. So this is the excitement of science.
Yes, discovery and
Yes.
the great love of praise as well. He's going to win.
Yeah.
He's going to win this recognition for doing it. His mind in rapture, he haunts the muses' seats.
And it's difficult. It's not, and it's untried. Not anybody else has really gotten there yet. So that's real exciting.
When you say that, that reminds me of how he's very clear in different sections that he does not believe that he could replace Epicurus, or he's not setting himself up at the same level of achievement as Epicurus. And yet he's saying these words here. Maybe what he's referring to is that he's committing Epicurus's words to poetry, is what he's the first to do. Okay, well, he first makes comments about how he's delighted with the sweet accomplishment of what he's doing. And then what I see next in that paragraph is the part about writing of lofty things and strive to free the mind from the severest bonds of what men call religion. So he's going back to the original opening of the book almost. He's doing it by discussing the atoms, but he's reminding us that all this discussion of the atoms has a purpose to free ourselves from false claims of religion.
Right. And then he talks about his verse. He makes it clear, though his theme is dark, and then he's seasoning it. And that's exactly what we've seen. There are multiple sections that are just talking about observations. They're not particularly poetic. And then he comes back in and he seasons it with the poetic sweets.
Really, by that way, he's making it clear. He's saying that these things are difficult to understand. And so maybe part of what he's saying there is that the difficulty of understanding is overcome not just by dry reasoning, but by the senses. I
thought you were going to say by pleasure.
Well, right, by pleasure.
So if you're enjoying reading this, because he's made it a pleasant thing to read, unless you don't like poetry, but if you're enjoying poetry, it's going to make it easier to learn the parts that are a little bit more dry. But I also take this bitter draught, not just as that, okay, this is science. Maybe we don't want to do science if we're poets, but it's also, it might be a little disappointing, to some people to learn the truth about reality. And maybe a bitter draught that there's not this, afterlife and this other world and the gods and all that kind of thing. So that's why I see him calling this a bitter draft of wormwood. It's a little sad, but we got to sweeten it up.
Right.
I never realized that's how you pronounce draft.
I think
I never put the GH together like that.
I hear it pronounced differently, and sometimes I use drought or something too. But I think draft is appropriate as well. Maybe that is proper.
I want to say it's not really related to the text, but the edges of the cup being tinged sweeten what's in the rest. I swear I've heard that before elsewhere, specifically with honey, but I cannot remember where, if it was in
a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Yeah. There you go. Oh, does Mary Poppins have Epicurus or have Lucretius in it?
I was expecting Elaine to raise that example, so I got it first. But yes, that's the one I remember, the spoonful of sugar example.
Yeah, it may have been Petronius, may have been Shakespeare, may have been La Mettrie. But yeah, that immediately stuck out to me when I was reading it.
And just for our listeners, as a precaution, don't use honey under age 1 because you can get botulism. But what we use in peds to mask flavor, in case you ever need to know this, best masker for bitter is chocolate.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So if you're going to give a bitter medicine, really what I do is give them a little spoonful of Hershey's syrup, or any kind of, I'm not advertising for Hershey's, but any kind of chocolate syrup first, and then put a little chocolate in the medicine if it's okay to mix it, and then follow it with a little chocolate taster, and you can get them to take it pretty well. doing that. So
You do mean sweet chocolate.
yeah. Oh yeah, they're not gonna drink like what Aztec chocolate or whatever if you're a kid. But yeah. So it's not just the sugar, it's actually the chocolate that masks it. So anyway, so we're trying to sweeten up this drink of material reality, but not with anything that's not true. So it's not
Right.
really a deception. And Lucretius doesn't say that, but I think it's important to discuss that this is not that we're mixing our wormwood with any kind of lies on the edge of the cup, where everything that we're saying is true, but it's important that there's a sweet part of the truth as well as maybe a bitter part.
Chocolate of truth.
The chocolate of truth. Awesome.
That's a really important part of what we're reading here today, though, the issue of betrayal. I mean, that whenever I've read these words in the past, that's definitely part of what goes through my mind here, is he's saying that the juice is bitter, the children are not really going to take it unless they are in some way bribed or in some way deceived is not the right word exactly, but clearly there's a component of the fact that some people are just not going to follow the truth and look to the end result unless you cajole them into doing it.
Unless they're goaded into it.
Seduced into it, but only with the truth. This is not a lie.
When Lucretius first said wormwood, I thought he was referring to absinthe at first.
You're referring to what?
Absinthe.
Did they have that?
No, they didn't have that back then. Well,
I don't understand the word. I don't understand the word you're saying, Charles. What?
Absinthe, the drink.
Absinthe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
It's a type of alcohol.
It also doesn't it have like a hallucinogen in it?
It's derived from wormwood.
So there is such a thing as wormwood. I mean, it's not a name that's made up or anything.
No.
An herb, okay. I've not ever tasted, or I don't know what that tastes like. I presume it's not very tasty to be used in this example. Elaine, you're the doctor. Do you know what wormwood is?
I'm looking it up because it's not something that I have ever used. Okay, here it has in there about the absinthe, the French liqueur. Oh, favorite of Van Gogh.
Or as we say in other parts, Van Gogh, huh?
I probably didn't say it right. Martin.
I don't know. Martin, how do you say Vincent Van...
I'm from the north, and we also say
what was
Van
it?
Gogh.
Vincent Van Gogh or which one? Van Gogh.
I said it right. Well, so here apparently it is still used in traditional Chinese medicine, but even though it has a reputation for causing hallucinations, it's not considered a hallucinogen. So I don't know. So pain relieving, anti-inflammatory, parasites. So probably they were taking it for anti-parasitic if they were giving it to kids. Get rid of their worms. Side effects. Could cause seizures, kidney failure. I guess I'd stay away from it.
As we continue through this paragraph, a lot of it is saying much the same thing over and over, but it's so hugely important. The part that catches my eye right now is the very last section in the 1743 edition. It says, "Thus to charm thy mind with my soft numbers, till you view the nature of all things clearly and perceive the figure and order they display." So going back to what Elaine was saying, we're not lying to you, and certainly we're not approaching you with this information in order to hurt you in any way. We're actually curing you of diseases that will make your life less happy or worse if you don't understand it. The sugar or the honey gets you past the initial bitterness till you then, I guess you acquire the taste, or would be an analogy, or something that you do that once you've gotten over the initial fear or the initial recoiling away from it, you realize, hey, this is what I should have been doing all along.
Yeah, okay, let me read Stallings here. I really like this. "Since those who've never tasted of it think this philosophy's a bitter pill to swallow, and the throng recoils, I wish to coat this physic in mellifluous song, to kiss it, as it were, with the sweet honey of the muse. That is the purpose of my poetry, as you peruse my lines, to try to keep your mind's attention, while you start to understand the framework of the universe's heart."
Interesting that she used the word pill, because that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
how a lot of like modern ideologies and philosophical views that are wide sweeping like this, they usually refer to like inducting people or teaching people to, or it's like an allegorical taking the pill.
Yeah, like the red pill.
The red pill.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the
yeah.
super hardcore like right wing red pill.
Men going their own way, and yeah.
We're talking about the Matrix.
Right. So yeah, so interesting that that's not a new metaphor.
Well, no, I mean
Yeah.
Stallings translation is, I'm sure she put in the word pill because of
Right,
its
but it's the same
connotation.
idea.
Same idea though.
And it helps you by her using that see the history of that kind of a metaphor.
Yeah, Stallings, her word choice for this is very contemporary.
Yeah. Well, I like this, which is actually so looking at Bailey says, since this philosophy full often seems too bitter to those who have not tasted it. And that, Stalling says, since those who've never tasted of it think this philosophy is a bitter pill to swallow. Looking at Martin Ferguson Smith, since this philosophy of ours often appears somewhat off-putting to those who've not experienced it. So that's really kind of even pulling back a little bit and not saying it really is a bitter pill, but you think it is. So I'm going to have to show you some honey so you can try it. And then once you see how things fit together, it'll be fine.
The sort of the language that it's very dark and like bitter.
Yeah.
Combined with Stallings' usage of the word pill.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of brought to the modern idea of the black pill.
The black pill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not up to date. What's the black pill?
Okay. It's sort of an exception of a very fatalist, nihilistic set of beliefs. It's very new.
When you said exception of it, you mean to take the black pill is to mean to become fatalist and to become reconciled to your death and to your fate, right, Charles?
And not so much fate, but I guess fate, but I don't like using that word.
Or it's kind of like extending your depression, and the black pill is pretty descriptive of what I understand it means, right? It means when you take the black pill, you're basically giving up. You're just not going to fight anymore. You're going to go ahead and accept the worst and that kind of thing.
Yes, it is very absurdist, very nihilistic.
Yeah.
It's a pretty new thing as well.
Okay, I'm seeing here on Quora that it's the extreme ideology of the incel community. So, but is there a non-incel version of the black pill?
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of connotations with people who have they've sort of given up.
Uh-huh.
So it infiltrates a lot of communities like that. But I would say there's definitely a subculture that is obsessed with using the word pill, like we mentioned earlier with the red pill, but that's a different matter.
Charles, black pill is basically becoming nihilist or depressed or sad or giving into bad things. Red pill, in a generic sense, is becoming more acquainted with reality. What is white pill? Is there a white pill? Are there other pills that we need to know about? I think there are several different colors of pill.
Have you read Brave New World?
Brave New World. I have read Brave New World. Is white pill in Brave New World?
Well, Soma, I guess.
Soma.
What is white pill then would mean putting yourself to sleep? Maybe there is no such thing as white pill, and I'll just...
You just started it, Cassius.
No, I think I've seen...
And as soon as we have started it, we want to say no.
No, we'll cut this out of the discussion. There's black pill and red pill, I know.
We'll take that.
I mean, I have heard of it, but it's just not ever really said. It's people assume there's an opposite, but it's not generally spoken.
Would the antinatalists be kind of a black pill? Like that we should stop reproducing and just let the human species go away because it's just...
No, it's more about people who, incels, for example, it happens to them.
It's one that this says they believe that reality is rigged and that some people are destined to fail no matter what they do.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, that's the way I see it used.
Yes.
Just hopeless, really hopeless.
Yes, hopeless is a good summary of it. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how much of that we should leave in and how much we'll cut out. I'll think about that.
Not much.
Go back to it. All right. let's go back to that final paragraph then,
So,
and still there's probably pieces we could get out of there.
for the record,
Go ahead.
I do want to make it clear that I don't believe in any of like the red pill, black pill, all that
Thank you, Charles.
stuff. It's
I appreciate that.
I think it's ridiculous.
I mean, as a generic term in terms of coming in contact with reality, or black pill being turning really negative, I mean, those don't necessarily have political connotation, do they? Or
It's just so tied up in this incel thing. Okay, so now I'm looking at Urban Dictionary. You can leave this out if you want to, but I just wanted to follow that up. The white pill, it says that being aware of a difficult situation or position and having a fighting can-do attitude and not giving up, plus accomplishing said things within the difficult situation. So it gives an example. Tom, how'd you get to the top of this business in just a few months of work? Jim, working hard, working correctly, and taking the white pill. So that's not that's not like Soma.
right. So we were wrong.
No. All my time spent on like forums and talking about philosophy with other people around my age on social media sites and Discord and all that.
Right.
And I know this is just my anecdote, but I have never, in the years that this sort of terminology has become more relevant, I've never seen the word white pill used to that meaning.
But Charles, it does come from Matrix the movie, and Matrix the movie is not necessarily super political, right? At least it's not political.
No, but a lot of people have used it to.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's where the connection is formed.
Yeah.
There's a person who was interested in Epicurean philosophy, and this is before we kind of got along, but he was talking about the red pill, and I kind of blew him off. I don't care about like MGTOW or any of that, and he got really mad at me because he was saying no, the red pill's not right wing. So I did hear him out, but I still don't really believe in it.
Yeah, in fact, if I were using these terms and trying to apply Epicurean, I would say Epicurean philosophy is red pilling somebody. If the meaning of if you can cut out all the right wing meaning of red pilling and go back to what the Matrix would be, which my understanding is the red pill was you then recognize that you're being manipulated. I mean, that's very Epicurean from that point of view. It's just that you can't use that term without being
exactly
categorized.
Which is why I like discussion about Epicurean philosophy. I've always sort of had that in the very, very back corner recesses of my mind, because there is a link there, because as we know, Epicurus and his philosophy was sort of a heterodox to the rest of Hellenistic Greece.
There's a strong analogy here. In fact, if red pill was a term that was usable, which I don't think it is, it's almost like we need our own term for red pilling that doesn't have those bad connotations, because that's a lot of what we're doing here. This whole wormwood honey thing is really, this is the medicine you need, the medicine of the soul.
That's why it stuck out to me.
Epicurean philosophy as the medicine that cures these ills of the soul is clearly the analogy that Lucretius is using.
Maybe the chocolate of truth is much more wholesome.
The chocolate of truth.
I love that, and I'm sure I'm going to use that this week. I'm determined to use the chocolate of truth.
It's a bit a little more relatable. I don't eat milk chocolate. I like the very bitter stuff.
You know, Charles, really what Lucretius is talking about here is that Epicurean philosophy is a medicine that does bring you in contact with true reality and shows you that that's the way to live your life in a healthy and happy way, is to get in contact with what's real and not live your life with all these fantasies about religion and supernatural spirits and beings and heavens and hells and so forth. But it's coming into terms with the reality. And even though it may appear to be bitter at the beginning, you come to understand that that's the natural way to live.
Or it may appear to be bitter before you've done it. You may have the wrong idea about it. So, yeah. And I like, so wormwood, you could even go further and say, since people use that for parasites, that's probably why they would have been given it to the kid. What are the worms you're trying to get rid of with this philosophy? The worms of religion.
I will admit that years ago when I first was reading Lucretius and saw wormwood, I looked it up on the internet and ordered some wormwood capsules. I don't know that I benefited from them in any way, and I'm not even sure what they're supposed to be used for, but I know you can still buy wormwood as a herb, absolutely, as part of these natural stores. But that would be going pretty far to apply Lucretius to start taking wormwood.
I'm looking at wormwood capsules, and even the capsules themselves look like little worms.
Martin, are you still with us? Did you happen to find a link or two on the fire?
Yes, I sent 2 links here in Skype. They are not really conclusive, so if you can find something better, you better replace it. But at least it indicates that some of the pros do think that friction can cause it.
Can cause forest fires, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But is it saying friction on the top of the trees? I'm looking at that. I'm not seeing
Well,
that.
I saw a thread.
Yeah, that's what's in my mind is these pictures and movies of tornadoes and so forth with all these or hurricane force winds with them blowing the tops of the trees in the forest against each other and all sorts of sparks coming off when they collide. But that's a movie. I haven't seen it.
But
myself.
there was I saw this thread looking it up, and a thread's not the most authoritative source, but it was this guy. His neighbor had 2 trees in his yard, and they were brushing up together towards the top. They had to be cut down, or like the branches had to be cut because of that.
So this second link doesn't say that. This just talks about a crown fire, but it doesn't say that it started in the crown. So I don't know. The other one is just a Quora link. Anyway, so maybe something that actually has a
basis in fact.
Yeah.
We'll see. Well, let's talk about closing comments for today.
I would say that I go with Lucretius, and I would say that the draft of Epicurean philosophy, you might think it's bitter, but it's really not. So give in to Lucretius honey and take a drink of it and see what you think.
Charles?
I don't know about that. Sounds a bit culty.
What's that?
I don't know, like drink or drink.
Oh, like the Kool-Aid? It's not Kool-Aid.
I know.
It's real.
That's what they said.
Oh, gosh.
I guess I don't have one pertaining to the text.
Well, I was going to say as a closing comment that maybe one way of saying this is don't take the red pill or the white pill or the black pill, but take the Epicurean pill instead.
Take the reality pill?
Yeah.
The Epicurean pill is the reality pill.
Yeah.
Martin, we shift to you for a more cogent closing comment.
No, as most of the time I don't have one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to say anything?
I'm gonna think more on that though. Maybe there's a thread in there somewhere.
Well, the Matrix movie itself, if we were to keep the analogy referring to the Matrix movie and that the red pill in Matrix means getting in tune with reality and seeing past the falseness and the manipulation that's around you, I don't think there's any issue, but that we would say that from an Epicurean perspective, that that's what you're doing by learning Epicurean philosophy.
Well, I mean, product of the times aside, with the Matrix, people are always going to superimpose meaning, whether it's philosophical or political, onto media. What was a product of its times, the Star Wars prequel movies that a lot of people compare to George Bush's administration. So I don't think a lot of like the Matrix or the concepts are inherently political.
That's what happened afterward.
Yes.
There's different levels of meaning, it seems like, always going on in most conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe an analogy here would be that even though we're discussing these what appear to be dry details about atoms, there's another level of meaning going on here, which is that this is the way you understand that all these fantasies about religion are unreal. Even though it may seem dry at times, even though it may seem bitter to spend your time talking about atoms and void, it's important to do so. Well, shall we close for the day?
I think so.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Y'all have a good week.
Thanks, everybody. We'll do it again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
We'll be safe.